So it just so coincided that, so you know what is going on now, and March the 8th is coming soon, so we decided not to postpone anything, but just to come here to see what you've got here. How do you use it? What are the prospects of the center? I have to say it is impressive. Masha showed me so how they manage it, how they handle it. So under her supervision, I also played around with some joysticks. It's good, especially since they're a new generation of the simulators. So I heard it from the head and I saw it with my own eyes. Obviously, we have to use this meeting to discuss, I guess, about the prospects of the developing the industry, to talk about the today's circumstances, so we can't avoid talking about that. That's given. But first of all, I would like to congratulate you all on the upcoming holiday, March the 8th, to wish all the best, all your colleagues, to all the women in Russia. I will address them a little later, to all of them. But now I would like to say, if we talk about the industry where you work in, that you belong to, I think there are more than 70,000 females, there are pilots, more than 200 first pilots, second pilots. Well, I'm not even talking about flight attendants, because that's special crew, special case. And everyone always had a lot of respect for the aviation industry, and for the females in aviation even more so. I think early last century we had first women in aviation. They really excelled during the Great Patriotic War. We know all these famous names of female regiments who fought during that war. And still we have female women all over, dispatchers, engineers, flight attendants, pilots. So it's a really strong women presence that complements the male part of the aviation industry. So I would suggest to stop with the introduction with that. I think it would be more useful and it would be more concrete if I am to take your question. So let's switch to that. So once again, I congratulate you on the upcoming holiday of March the 8th. Thank you. So please, are there any questions, or we will just drink some tea? We've got questions. Good afternoon, Mr. Putin. I'm a second pilot of Airbus, and my question is about the situation in Ukraine. We all support your actions, the special military operation that is unfolding there, proceeding there. And the main question that we have, every one of us have, why this operation started, and was it possible to avoid it? We understand and we support your actions, but our hearts are concerned about our families, about our loved ones who live in Ukraine. So we know that civilians do not suffer, but please reassure us, what is at the end of this path? What will this operation be, when this operation be over? I will try to be brief, so I will try to start at the very gist of the issue. I said that at the beginning of the operation, and I used to tell it before this decision was made, a difficult decision, I have to admit. So what is it about? After the coup d'etat, anti-constitutional coup d'etat, that was actively supported, unfortunately, by the Western countries. So, and they are not even hiding that. They said directly that they spent $5 billion. They were handing out hot pies and so on and so forth. And instead of bringing the situation back, even if it went out of control, even if it got too excessive, so they planned one thing, but it turned out differently, still, they had to bring it back to the political vein, especially since the beginning of this coup d'etat. The three foreign ministers came to Kiev and signed agreement with the then authorities, and they guaranteed they were guarantors of those agreements, that it was going to remain political. But nothing of that happened, so they overthrew the government. They supported those who overthrew the government, and then you all know what happened next in Crimea, in the southeast of Ukraine, and Donbass, where people didn't support that coup. So in Crimea, people voted at the referendum to become part of the Russian Federation. And of course, we couldn't help but supporting that, especially since they were threatened by nationalists. And I'm going to say now that we were right back then. We have evidence of that. And then at the same time, events started to unfold in Donbass. Where did it lead to? The people who started resisting to what was happening, so they were persecuted. And there, in those territories, Kiev authorities launched a military operation, two punitive, large-scale military operation using heavy weaponry, using aviation. So they were bombing, they were shelling Donetsk squares from the skies with tanks, with planes. So both these military campaigns, they failed. So they were defeated. After that, the so-called Minsk agreements were signed, or the complex package of measures, as they are also called. And it showed the path of the peaceful resolution of this conflict. And we did everything we could to follow this path, to restore the territorial integrity of Ukraine and to protect the interests of the people who live there. What did they demand? They demanded elementary things, basic things, the right to speak their native language. In this case, it was Russian language. To live, to follow their traditions. Nothing special. Absolutely nothing. But no, so they blocked those territories, they put embargo on them, so they canceled the banking system, they stopped paying welfares and retirement pensions, so they were just handing out some small sums. Still, they had to go through a lot to get those pensions. So maybe I will be too direct because I'm just thinking of it now. The situation makes me speak things like that, talk about things like that, because you see when in one region and in another region, things like that are happening, when people are getting wounded and killed. And then, well, that's a separate issue, and the local authorities have to deal with that. And then they start killing those animals, they shooting them down. But people in Donbass are not stray dogs. 13 to 14,000 were killed throughout those years. More than 500 children were killed. But what's especially intolerable is that this so-called civilized West prefers not to notice that, not to pay attention all these years, all these 8 years. And recently, the Kyiv authorities started saying it publicly, directly, that they are not going to implement the Minsk agreements. They were told it from the TV screens, online. They were saying that publicly, we don't like it, we're not going to implement it. And they were accusing Russia that we are the ones who are not implementing that. But that makes no sense. It's absurd. They're calling the white the black, and they're calling black the white. And then it got worse. All of a sudden, they started saying that they were going, well, they were saying about that for a long time. But they became more and more vocal about admitting Ukraine to NATO. Do you imagine what it could result in, and still can? Because in accordance with the treaty of these organizations, all the other members of the alliance are supposed to support any member in case of the conflict. No one admits that Crimea belongs to Russia, so now they are fighting in Donbass, the same they will do in Crimea, and then we would have to fight the entire alliance. Do you understand what would be the consequences? I think everyone understands that. And now they are talking about acquiring nuclear status, acquiring nuclear weapons. We can't just pretend that we do not notice that. And we know how the so-called West behaves in regard of Russia. Ukraine, since Soviet times, have nuclear capabilities, they have materials, they have launchers, they have rockets. So they have factories that were building ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles for the Soviet Union, so they can use those capabilities, those capacities, and they will help them from across the ocean. And after that, they will say that we do not recognize their nuclear status, they did it themselves, they will monitor those complexes, and from that very second, the fate of Russia will be absolutely different. Because if that's the case, our strategic adversary, they don't even need to have ballistic intercontinental missiles. They will just hold us at gunpoint next to our borders. How can we fail to see that, to notice that? That's a real threat. That's not just some nonsense that we made up. And the boys that are fighting there, laying down their lives, they are laying down their lives. They are fighting for the future of our children. That's obvious. And people who do not want to understand that, especially from the current authorities, they have to understand that if they continue to do what they have been doing, and I've told that before, because then the future of the Ukrainian state will come under question. And if that happens, that would be on their conscience. And what's happening now? I have already said what our objective there. First of all, to protect people living in Donbass. How? By demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine. By making it neutral. Why? Because if they are neutral, then they won't join NATO. And it is said in their constitution that they will join NATO. That's in their constitution. That's what it says. And what denazification is. So I'm talking with my Western counterparts. You also have radicals. Yes, we do. But we do not have them in our government. And everyone knows that they have. Yes, maybe we have some jerks that are running around with these mottos and slogans. But do we support it at the government level? Do we have torchlight processions in Moscow or in other large cities with swastikas, with the torches, like in 1930s in Germany? Do we have anything like that? But they do, and they support them. Do we support those who killed Russians, Jewish, Polacks during the war? Are we making heroes out of them? And they do. They are. And what is happening now is also very important. Look. They have taken hostage foreign nationals. In Sumy and Kharkov, more than 6,000 young people, students. So they gathered them at the railway station, and they are keeping them there for 3 days already. 3 days they are keeping these kids there. Everyone were told. We told that to the authorities of Ukraine. Yes, we will deal with that. We told about that to the European leaders. I personally talked to them. Yes, we will influence them. We told the UN Secretary General about that. Yes, we will deal with that. No one did anything. What's even... And they treat their own citizens even worse. They are hiding behind their backs, using them as human shields. Look at Mariupol. That's happening as we speak, just right now. We've got a phone call from the government, from Kiev, our military. Open humanitarian corridors for our citizens to live. Our military reacted right away. We stopped all hostilities, so we were just observing what was going on. But they are not letting anyone out. No one is allowed to leave. They are hiding behind their backs, using them as human shields. So what can you call such people? Neo-Nazis, obviously. And we also see militants from the Middle East, from some European states. We can hear them when on the radio, when they talk to each other. They use the so-called jihad mobiles when they put a lot of explosives on a vehicle and then they just send it. But they fail, and they won't succeed. But who are they if not neo-Nazis? And they destroy their own country, their own state with these actions. So one of our key demands is to demilitarize the country. We are helping people, citizens of Donbass, by achieving neutral status of Ukraine, by demilitarizing the country, because we have to understand where are the weapons, who is controlling them, because a lot of things can happen. And we are talking about various options. And we are talking also with the Kiev government. During talks and negotiations in Belarus, I would like to thank President Lukashenko for organizing these talks. Our proposals are on the table. So Kiev negotiators know that, so hopefully they will make a positive decision. So please, next one. Yulia Shvitka, second pilot, Aeroflot Company. Mr. Putin, hello. Hello. I've got a question about the current situation because there are a lot of rumors about martial law, about recruiting volunteers, about using conscripts, about sending additional conscripts to Ukraine. Could you give us a definite answer? Are you going to declare martial law? And are you going to use conscripts and send them to Ukraine? So a lot of what is happening now, what we're seeing now, these are different ways of fighting Russia, and the sanctions that are being imposed, they're a lot like declaring war. Thank God it hasn't come to that yet, but I think everyone understands what kind of consequences it's fraught with. So our so-called partners have to understand that even though they make these outrageous statements, like Foreign Minister of the UK did that when she said NATO can get involved into the conflict. And right away we had to make